Hello! Oh my gosh, so exciting. Hi everybody! Wednesdays at 6 o'clock with me, Kristen Pozolp. So I am so excited to talk about this thing that I have discovered in the last couple weeks and I've been really diving into. It is so in line with the work that I do. And I've always known the work that I do might seem out there or woo-woo or yeah, that sounds really great, but and so I wanted to share this with you. So have you ever heard of a scientist? His name is Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton. If you haven't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my notes on Dr. Lipton to give you a little bit of background on who he is. So he is a stem cell biologist. He started out studying the molecular mechanisms controlling cell behavior. Sounds fascinating. He went on to study the membrane of cells, and the research he conducted at Stanford University's School of Medicine showed that the cell's environment, so the environment around the cell, controlled the behavior and physiology of the cell, turning genes on and off. His discoveries ran counter to the established view that life is controlled by our genes. So I've heard, when I did my summit, there was one of my speakers was this fascinating man. His name is Wes Chapman. His story was unbelievable. The things that he had overcome in his early life, abuse, neglect, being medicated for psychological issues from the time he was just young, 4 years old. And he was the one who had mentioned Bruce Lipton to me. And so a couple weeks ago I started really doing a little bit of research and wanted to see, his book, Bruce Lipton's book, is called The Biology of Belief. And I have been listening to him speak on podcasts and on YouTube, and some of the things that he says are just so fascinating to me because I am a firm believer in personal experience, but also seeing things out in the world, that our thoughts create our reality. And it's so odd to think about. It's so kind of outside of our realm of reality to think that we can control our reality by the thoughts that we think. But if you actually start to look at it, you can see how it's possibly manifested itself in your life. So I want to just talk about a couple of the things that he mentions in his talks. So the biology of belief. So his whole premise, all of his research has shown that while conventional science has told us, listen, your genes control how heavy you are. Your genes control if you're going to develop a certain disease. Your genes control what kind of personality you have. This is one of the things that I have seen some people use as a reason why they may be living in a body that they don't necessarily like to live in. And I've heard it time and again that, well, I come from a long line of heavy people, or I come from a long line of angry people, or I come from my family was this, and it's in my genes, it's hereditary, or I've always been this way. And Dr. Lipton's, research has shown that genes don't control our biology. It's our environment and our thoughts control our biology. And so one of the things he talks about is he kind of goes back and talks about, so he says 95% of our life is coming from the programs of how we've learned to live life. And we get those programs in the first 7 years of life. So if you were to just look at your own life and say, okay, well, what are some of the programs that I downloaded as a child? What are some of the programs I downloaded? Well, if you look, what he says is if you don't really remember, I'm the perfect candidate for being like, I don't remember last week. How are you expect me to remember? And it was, 3, 4, 5, 6. But he says, one of the ways to know what was downloaded in your first 7 years of life is to look at an area of your life that you struggle with. So there's an area of your life that you struggle with. If you're listening to this Facebook Live, it's probably an area around your health and your weight. And if you look at that area of your life and you've been struggling with it for a long time, there's a program in your subconscious that you received in those first 7 years of life that doesn't support the thing that you want. So you can imagine that the programming that you got during those 7 years of life didn't support you being vital and healthy and active, and and if you look, you'll probably see that. So, and what he talks about, which is so fascinating, is as children, first of all, we can't speak. So what we do is we observe, and we're just downloading. We just learn. We observe from parents. We observe from siblings. We observe from our immediate environment, and those are the people who are teaching us, whether they are outwardly teaching us or not. We learn from their behaviors, their actions, their words, all of this. And so I just find this so fascinating because, if I were to look and, there are things in my life that I feel like, gosh, I'm constantly having a battle with this. It's money. Like, money is always this thing that I feel like stressed about, or there's never enough. And if I'm to be honest and I'm to look into my past and my history, of course, yes, absolutely. I 100% can see that the programming that I received from my parents, who received the same programming or something similar from theirs, and so on and so on and so on, and all this stuff is passed down, is one of a sense of lack. Or it's, money doesn't grow on trees, or it takes hard work, or whatever. The themes that we hear ourselves saying in our subconscious, in the back of our minds all the time, like it's just running the show. And so this for me is personally why I do so much personal development work. I mean, I've been doing personal development work for forever. My parents put me in to my first personal development program when I was 10 years old. So that may have planted a seed for me to be a lifelong seeker of why am I here? What's it all about? That's just who I am and what I'm up to. And so, if we are to look at our lives, so if health and weight is an issue for you, and you can honestly say, it's always been an issue for me, or, I come from a long line of heavy people, or we love food, those are and what I love about this is he's saying, this isn't hereditary. This isn't in your genes. Your environment dictate your genes. And he talks about that there are 12 genes that have to be present in order for cancer to develop in the body. And so, he talks a lot about it, and I'm not going to get into it because that's not a topic that I want to discuss, but it's just fascinating to me that his whole research, his whole life, and he was to say he was ahead of the crowd, he was really shunned for many, many years by the scientific community, because all of the research was your genes dictate what happens to you. And there's certain things, immutable genes, although he says it would be very, very difficult for you to change the color of your skin or the color of your eyes genetically. It can be done, but he said we're talking about things like our body structure and those kinds of things. So I found it interesting. I just wanted to share a couple things that he talked about. So 95% of what we learn, what we download, 95% of our life comes from the things that we download in those first 7 years. So if there's something that's not working, look there. He says behavior is passed on through families and through learning, and that it really is based on how you grew up. And so much of how we grew up and the messages that we heard are so deeply, they're so subconscious. They're just so on the subconscious level. And that's probably why it's so difficult for people to truly transform the area of life where in some way, in some form or fashion, it's just, this is the way it is. It's hard to make money, or we're heavy people, or we have big bones, or well, we love food. You know, these are these things that you hear people say. I've heard people say this for a really, really long time. So to me, it's exciting to hear about this man, this scientist who's devoted his life to studying cells and what actually happens. You know, and if you've never heard anything about, and I'm looking over here because I have him pulled up on my computer. If you've never heard anything about quantum physics, look it up. It's fantastic. It's fascinating. This is the entire mind-body connection. So when I talk about weight, I have said this, I almost get sick of hearing myself say it. I could give a shit what you're eating. I really could. What you're eating makes no difference. It really makes no difference. Now, is it going to physiologically make a difference in your energy and how you feel? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to go to work on telling you what foods to eat and what foods to not eat so that you can lose weight if you're not willing to deal with the deeper subconscious stories and beliefs that you have about yourself that have been passed down to you, and they were passed down to the people who passed them to you, and so on and so on and so on. But what's great about this is that he says the subconscious is on autopilot, and how the subconscious learns. There's two ways that the subconscious mind learns. The first way is through hypnosis, and what he says is in the first 7 years of life, a child's brain operates at a theta. So if you know anything about brainwaves, there's alpha, there's beta. So it operates in a theta state, which really mimics or looks a lot like a hypnotic state, a hypnosis state. Hi, Sam. So that's why, you know, you see children running around and they're just, you know, they have imaginations and they're happy-go-lucky and they create. Their theta is a creation, like brainwave. Yeah. So there's alpha, there's beta. So theta is this very receptive kind of just like creating. And so I have my daughter is about to turn 7, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what have I downloaded into her that she's gonna, you know, at some point she's gonna be like, you told me blah blah. And I mean I can already see it with my, you know, with my 10-year-old, the things that she's adopted from me, any of this anxiety or anything that I've experienced that I have just passed on to her. So the two ways the subconscious mind learns is through hypnosis, through this theta brain state, and through practice and repetition. And he said there's this great trend right now. It's called fake it till you make it. And, you know, we hear so much about, being positive and having a positive outlook. And man, if I could tell you, so if you know anything about like East Coast living, so New Yorkers are, and I love my New Yorkers. I mean, I am one. I'm from New York. I have a lot of, I left New York when I was 9, so I got imprinted. I got downloaded a lot of this like New York, I want to just call it mindset or mentality. And a lot of it has to do with that life is really hard. And you know what? It is really hard there. The hard winters and hard summers, and, you know, there's just like the elements are really difficult. But I've always looked at life as hard. And so that is just my programming. My programming is, this is hard, life is hard. I don't want to do it because it's hard. And so, but if you have spent any time with true New Yorkers, you know, it's there's a hardness, there's a bit of an edge, there's a bit of negativity. There's negativity, and it's not that New Yorkers are some of the best people on the planet. I mean, they're just expressive and honestly kind and generous and loving, like nothing else about that. There's no judgment about what I'm saying. But what I mean is there's a negativity, there's a collective complaining, and it's just what you do. You know, you just grow up and everything is like, well, what's wrong? Well, what's not wrong? You know, it's just kind of how you bond with people. And I remember, up until recently, the last maybe 5 or 10 years, that was how I connected with people, was in commiserating, you know, sharing my, if I could connect with someone because on this level of, oh, how crappy is your life right now? That's crappy. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. And I still do it sometimes. But I can see that kind of spirals me down this negative kind of woe is me Eeyore in a sense. And you don't even realize that it's happening. Like, I don't really even realize that it's happening. But But if I'm surrounded by that, that's all, it's going to be all that I know, right? So until I was 9, I lived there. So I was downloaded all of this stuff. And if I were to look, yeah, I have a lot of that life is hard and oh man, it's real, it's real rough out there. Well, if I want to change my state, if I want to change my state, I have to start here. Like I just have to start here. I have to start with the thoughts that are going through my mind and the beliefs that I have about myself and what's possible. And so what, he just talked, I've been just absolutely absorbing as much of what this man is talking about because I find it absolutely fascinating that what we think is this finite, unchangeable thing called us, right? Like it seems so hard to change or to transform. And trust me, I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's because that subconscious tape is playing and we don't even realize what it is. So I would invite you, if you have any sort of belief about yourself based on what kind of a family you come from or genetics or, I've always been heavy, that you actually take a step back and look at some of the conversations. So just start to observe some of the conversations that, if it's possible for you, your immediate family has. Are they positive and uplifting, or are they, and they could be positive and uplifting, and that's great. But what are the behaviors that are associated with there's always a behavior that follows a thought, always. So we think something and we behave and act in accordance with that. So you don't look out at your life. I have very good relationships in my life. Like I've got great relationships, and I have a great marriage. My husband we have unbelievable communication. We really do. We fight, and we are both really dedicated to being our best selves. And so we commit to that. And I think I could honestly say that there are people in my life that look at my relationship and they're like, wow, you're really lucky. I wouldn't necessarily call it luck. I'd call it, it's conscious. We're conscious of it. And it's not any easier. It's not any easier. But I think if I were to look back, I don't think that I had a negative imprint or negative programming, even though my parents got divorced. But in those first 7 years, I feel like I was surrounded by a lot of love, big family, cousins all over the place. Like, I just feel like that was what was going on in my life. So if you were to look at your family and the patterns that are that are still in effect in your family, how do you approach food? How do you approach hunger? How do you approach your sense of self? Like, what makes up, who do you think you are from the standpoint of, well, I've always thought that it was just our genetics. I would challenge you to, first of all, pick up the biology of belief. The biology of belief. And I'm just diving into this work because it's just absolutely just fascinating to me. And I think that it would be a huge benefit to anyone that thinks, I can't really change because this is who I am. Dr. Lipton's whole entire, his whole entire body of research is genes actually respond. Genes are a blueprint. What he talks about is genes are just a blueprint. So you have this blueprint, and then you actually take action on the blueprint, and then that's the thing that actually makes the difference, is the action that's taken. The thought, for us, when we talk about genes, the thought. So the blueprint just sits there. The gene just sits there. It has to be acted upon. And when it's acted upon via thoughts or words or things that we do or don't do, then the genes respond. So I hope this gives you a sense of empowerment, because nothing is outside of the realm of possibility for you with your weight, with food, with transformation, and absolutely anything is possible. The work that needs to be done is here. So the beliefs that you hold about yourself, that's the work that needs to be done. So I wanted to get on, share a little bit about this amazing man that I've just been following and listening to and just gobbling up all of his stuff. And let me know, do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think? Have you studied him? Have you read any of his books or listened to his lectures? I'd be fascinated to learn. And share your thoughts with me, because in whatever way that I can, I'm here to empower you. And I find this work extremely empowering. So let me know what you think. And I look forward to your comments, so please share. And if you don't want to share them publicly in the comments, you can private message me. And I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.